Good morning, everybody. Today is the last episode of this Drupal 7 to 8 migration live stream, and I need to mute my iPad because I hear myself. There we go. It's been quite a journey. I have a little synopsis with thumbnails from each of the episodes here, and myself down here. I can actually look, if I look like right here, I think I can see myself looking at myself. You can see kind of a history of how I learned how to use OBS in there as well, because the first few episodes were a bit of a chore, and I think episode 4 or 5 or 6, somewhere in there, was when my computer pretty much pooped out, and I determined at that point I could either figure out how to run everything in the cloud or get a new computer, and luckily I got some sponsorship from someone for my Ansible live streams that helped me get that new computer. So I'm glad you're with me today. I'm streaming now in 60 frames per second, so you can see things a little more clearly at a higher bit rate. But today's live stream is the conclusion of this series, this Drupal 7 to 8 migration. There's probably a couple other videos I'm going to work on after this to talk about a couple of the aspects that were a little more challenging. One of the things was getting search set up. There's a lot more clicking around in that than you might expect, and some of those things might be hard for someone to do the first time they're doing setting up search with Solr on their site and setting up a search page and the views with search, all that kind of stuff. So I'll probably do an episode outside of this live stream because the live stream is a little bit more, sometimes it's hard to fit in 1 hour all the things you want to talk about in a live stream, and sometimes it's also hard to get a more complex thing like setting up search into a live stream format, just because, I don't know, my brain works a little bit differently live than it does when I'm not being watched by other people. So anyway, we'll get to that in we'll get to the actual the conclusion of this whole series in a few minutes. But before that, I wanted to show the music video of the week. And this is, if you've never been to a DrupalCon before and never been up early for the pre-note experience, which is before the keynote, which this may or may not actually happen in future DrupalCons. I don't know. It seemed to be kind of tailing off over the years. But it's kind of like the Earth's weirdest variety show. I guess that might be the best way to describe it. And this video, well, you'll see why I say that in just a moment. Let me find where that video is, and I'll cue it up here for you. This is from DrupalCon New Orleans 2016, and it's totally alongside
Come on, oh developers, contribute to Drupal. Lovers of the code and lovers of community, contribute code and transform the world. Hey, ho! Come on, oh developers, contribute to Drupal.
So you can see things, it can get a bit cheesy sometimes, and but it's a fun experience. And this week would have been DrupalCon North America Minneapolis, so it's sad that we're missing out on that. But as I said in a tweet earlier today, if you're missing that Drupal community vibe, you can always bring it up in the live chat in this stream. And I see Oliver mention where he's from. It'd be cool if you want to share where you're from and watching this. It's neat to see the community that we have in these live streams and in the Drupal community globally. And Techie Guy also asked, when will the next video about the Pi cluster come out? It's an interesting thing. Last week on Friday, this YouTube channel passed 20,000 subscribers, or past 10,000 subscribers, and I hadn't imagined that happening in the next year or two. And then all of a sudden, with all the live streaming that I did in these Pi episodes, it went from 5,000 subscribers, which I've had since like 2016. I've had YouTube since 2006. I actually started off on Google videos, and then Google bought YouTube, so I switched to YouTube. And I never thought I'd have a lot of subscribers, but it was kind of crazy. Those 2 videos I did on the Pi clusters must have, and I'm it's sad, but I think that part of it has to do with a thumbnail with me with my mouth open looking like an idiot. Because of that and the content in the videos, they both became recommended videos on a lot of people's homepage feeds. And they kind of blew up, and now I have almost 20,000 subscribers. So I wasn't planning on doing another fun milestone video yet, but if I hit 25,000, maybe I'll figure out some way to do that. I don't know if I want to pay hundreds of dollars for a cluster to run 25,000 pods in Kubernetes, but maybe I could do something else. But anyway, welcome to the stream today. Today we're going to have a fun adventure in moving Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. Last week we had a bit of fun right at the end of the episode because I deployed an update to my Drupal 8 site, which is running concurrently. So I have jeffgeerling.com. This is a Drupal 7 website. And concurrently I have a Drupal 8 website that doesn't have HTTPS on the same server. Last week when I deployed it, it took down the server because the Nginx configuration was wrong. And the first thing that happened was I accidentally didn't turn off SSL on the D8 domain. I didn't have a certificate set up for it. I could have added one with Let's Encrypt, but I forgot to set SSL enabled to false, so my playbook deployed an SSL configuration which used this file, a dhparam file for the Diffie-Huffman parameters for SSL cert negotiation. And it couldn't find that file twice. It's funny because the file existed, but it apparently you can't read the same file twice for two different domains, I guess, or something like that. And then the other problem was Nginx actually looks up the domain. So I didn't ever point this domain at the server, d8.jeffgeerling.com, and it's still not pointed at the server. I just have it set up in my local hosts file for testing because I didn't want this site to be public. I didn't want Google indexing the new Drupal 8 stuff, because it's going to replace the Drupal 7 stuff. So Nginx bailed on that, and there's a way to turn that off in Nginx, but what I basically did to fix that was I added this testing domain into the hosts file on the server like this, and now the Nginx stuff started working again. So I know Oliver particularly asked about why that, can you do a postmortem on it? So that's the postmortem. Two things. This is what happens when you do things live and you don't test at all, and you don't test in a test environment. Things blow up from time to time, and that's what happened. So in my Ansible playbook, I now have a task that makes sure that all the addresses of all the hosts that I have running on the server are in the host file, even if they're not in DNS. So this shouldn't happen again if I do the same thing. Although eventually, once I move these other Drupal 7 sites off the server, I'm actually going to be moving everything into a new hosting arrangement, which I'll probably do some videos about at some point. What else? There was also a 404 because in Drupal 8, the codebase has a web subdirectory. In Drupal 7, I just had the Drupal document root was in the Git repository root. In Drupal 8, there's a web subdirectory, and then there's other files like vendor and all that outside of it. So that's kind of more of a formal PHP thing. Typically, PHP applications nowadays have a web or doc root or something type of folder in it, and that's where your actual document root would be. So this is what I did there, and then I ran into this issue. This was a lot of fun, and I'll talk about that a little bit here. Where is it? The weird composer issue. So I was trying to upgrade Drupal 8.8.4 to 8.8.5, and I've written in the past, so let me go to my site and search for Composer. I've written in the past about a lot of other Composer oddities, how to convert a Drupal codebase to use Composer. We did a BOF, Matt Grasmick and I did a BOF, Birds of a Feather session at DrupalCon Baltimore on Composer and how to use it. I have tips, speeding up Composer stuff, notes about how Composer and Drupal are a little bit weird together compared to some other PHP projects that use Composer. So if you want to learn more about my experiences with Composer, you can read through those posts later. But suffice it to say, almost every time that I do a new thing in Composer, I run into a new issue. And the new issue I ran into here was, first, I tried upgrading, apparently in a short window of time where Drupal 8.9 dev was in a funny state where it actually got installed instead of Drupal 8 when you updated. even though Drupal had prefer stable set in its composer, which is supposed to only upgrade you to stable versions, but it was upgrading me to a dev version because prefer stable doesn't mean only stable. It means prefer it, but it's okay to go to dev sometimes. So it was upgrading to Drupal 8.9.x dev because 8.9.x had a newer dependency that Drupal 8.8 was not, it wasn't something that worked with Drupal 8.8. So it upgraded Drupal to get that latest other dependency that was more stable. It's kind of complicated. Dependency resolution is always insane. And I see that especially because I also do some work with Ansible and Ansible Galaxy, which is another dependency resolution tool, and NPM with Node.js and Ruby gems, and all these different systems have their own quirks. And this is one that's in Composer. So anyway, I got that resolved. I reverted all my code back. However, when I reverted the code, the composer.lock file, apparently the composer.lock file is not the source of truth for what packages are actually going to be installed. So if you did what I did and updated to Drupal 8.9 accidentally, it replaced Zend Diactros with a thing called Laminus Diactros, which is a package that replaced Zend. But it left the Laminus Diactros package installed, and even though in the composer.lock file it had the Zend package, because the Laminus one replaced it, when I did the composer upgrade, it upgraded the lock file to use what was on the file system instead of following what was in the lock file. And basically, the moral of this story is I posted a blog post on this. If you want to be safe, always delete your entire vendor directory in a PHP project when you're doing things like composer upgrade, or if you're doing a composer install on a server, make sure that you delete the vendor directory. And this is another reason why, in some ways, it's better if you're deploying Drupal to use a container system, to use Docker or something like that, so that you build a new image that has a fresh composer installation every time, because you won't run into these kind of problems. Or if you're not using Docker or containers, whenever you're installing your PHP projects, make sure that you build it in a clean directory or a clean environment, and then you deploy that built artifact into your production server. In my case, the server that I'm running on, and I actually had thoughts of taking my Pi cluster, which is running some of these Raspberry Pis, and deploying jeffgeerling.com to it today. But that was just a little bit too much extra risk that I didn't want to take on for a live stream. And, I didn't want to mess everything up and then spend the entire live stream just trying to debug why is Drupal 8 blowing up on a Raspberry Pi cluster, in addition to all the other little things. But the server that it's running on is a little bit old. And at some point, I'm going to decommission it and move everything into a new structure, probably in a Kubernetes cluster that I manage for other things, just to save costs, because right now I'm running dozens of servers. I could be running just 10 or 12 for all the different things that I do outside of a couple of the services I run, and it'd be nice to consolidate. But right now, since it's running on that legacy server, I'm updating it in place. So I'm going to be updating my Ansible Playbook to also delete that vendor directory whenever it does an update and a deployment, instead of leaving it in place and doing it. But anyway, that's a little background on some composer things that I ran into. I was actually working on that late last night because I wanted to get everything updated to Drupal 8.8.5 because I hate launching a new site that's already out of date. So I got that working, and now it's migration time. Woohoo! And I even have, I played around with OBS yesterday too. I have this confetti. It's migration time. Anyway, that's pretty cheesy. But let me take a drink and we'll get started on this. By the way, I also have a backup in case we have an experience like last week. I have the It's Fine fire here. I don't have a mug with me, but so I can't drink it while it says it's fine or anything, but I do have the fire and flames just in case we need them. All right, let's see. Go back over here to Safari, and let's go to the punch list. So last week we started kind of working on this, but I didn't get too far because I had that outage and we didn't get to type up much here. But every time I do a big migration, especially if it affects a production site, which has some revenue associated with it, you want to make sure that you've pre-tested everything that you can. There's obviously one or two things that you can't, but you want to make sure that you've tested the deployment updates. You want to test in Drupal's case, running the migration, making sure that that doesn't fail. You want to test changing directories and changing things on the server. And you also want to make sure that if there's anything like, in this case, the migration needs more than 256 megs of RAM, which is the limit that I have set on the server right now. So I wanted to make sure that I had enough RAM so that the migration doesn't fail at the end. Usually it doesn't even cause a problem, but I'd rather it not fail and not cause a problem instead of fail and maybe cause a problem, but I don't know. And also Oliver is mentioning in the live chat his Ansible playbooks. And I did want to mention that I believe, Oliver, if you want to paste in the live chat the link to that presentation you did a week or two ago, you talked about Ansible and how you're using Ansible to do deployments. And that is definitely the most formal way. I'll show you what I'm doing right now, which we'll do in just a minute, using this deploy playbook, or this deploy tasks in Ansible. So I just make sure that the folder exists. And again, this is an old server. I built this server in like 2015 or 16 or something, and I've been adapting it over time. And so most of these things are like what I did for Drupal 7, and then I tacked on some Drupal 8 stuff to it. So I make sure that the folder exists, because if it doesn't exist, you can't clone into it. Make sure that you can execute on the home directory. For some reason, I don't know why I needed this task, but don't worry about that, I guess. And then I have a git task using Ansible that clones and makes sure that the version of the code base is master. At some point, I'm going to change this to tags, but maybe not. It's my personal site, and I'm the only one that commits to it, and I only commit to master when I know I'm going to go to production anyways. So typically, though, you wouldn't want to do something like this. You'd want to have tags that you deploy to your site, especially so that you could roll back to another tag easily. With this, I would have to change the commit or manually go into the server and pull back to another commit, which is kind of ridiculous. But anyway, so don't do as I say, not as I do there. But then if this results in a change to the code base, it runs this block, this Ansible block. And here's the when condition on that to make sure it only runs when the code base is changed. So then it makes sure that the site's default directory is writable. By default, Drupal will take off write permissions on that just for safety and security. But when you do updates, if Drupal has to write a file to that directory, like I forget what files are in there, that sometimes Drupal writes the services file or something like that, that would fail the deployment. So I make sure that's writable before we run these next commands. There's composer install. I think composer install scaffolds files into that directory. That's why I have that set. So it does composer install with no dev and makes sure that all the dependencies are up to date. Like I said, I should probably add a task right here that removes the vendor directory first. And if I'm going to do that, I might as well also add a task that puts the site into maintenance mode, because it'll blow up if you remove all the vendor directory. That would also be a time if you use a CDN like Cloudflare or something, you'd want to make sure that the site is operating that way so that if your visitors hit your site, they don't see an outage, they just see whatever was cached in the past 15 minutes or whatever. And then it runs a few post-deployment tasks. So it runs cache clear drush and then cache rebuild to make sure Drupal's caches are up to date. Then it does a config import, and since all of my site's configuration is in code and I'm using config split, this will install any new modules that I've installed in the code base. It'll set any new settings. It'll configure content types, all that kind of stuff. Pretty nice how Drupal's configuration system works. So that basically I never change any configuration in production. I only change it locally and push it up. And then it will run any database updates that exist. Some people also add another cache rebuild after update DB. But both of these commands should update Drupal's caches properly. Of course, I'm probably going to get burned by that someday, but that's kind of like belt and suspenders approach to run cache rebuild again after update DB, because Drupal should do that by itself. And then at the end, there's some cron jobs that it configures for Drupal. So I'm going to change some of these things once we go live in a few minutes. But first, I'm going to make sure that the code is up to date. So I'm going to run this Ansible playbook. And it should, I think I ran this last night before I went to bed. So it should be the latest code, but it's always it's always best to be safe and make sure. Yeah, so it's already at the latest code base version. So that's good. And then I'm going to log into the server itself. SSH guy at midwesternmac.com. Domains. I have new mail apparently. Probably a cron job that failed. Domains Drupal 8. And so this is the folder. I'll bring this up a little bit. This is the folder that has my Drupal 8 code base in it. And I'm going to run the migrate import command to update everything. And this is running on the same server as my Drupal 7 site. So I just configured the Drupal 8 site to look at the Drupal 7 site with a read-only user to be able to pull all the information out of that server. So I'm going to run this, and it should, if everything goes well, run through every bit of content in Drupal 7 and make sure that everything's updated. So I can see there's one new URL redirection, and this is what URL alias is. This will probably take a few minutes. So one thing too is if you have any questions during the live stream, you can pop them in the live chat and we can discuss them, because this might take a few minutes. And once we cut over everything, it might take a few minutes to do other processes as well, and we might have some time to talk. So we're running this now. I'm not going to check the box until it completes. And then I'm also going to run through these steps, manual migration steps. So let's take a look at those. So I did these last week. I think I did them right after the live stream. I made sure that these were done. And then I exported the configuration from the new D8 site so that all the UUIDs for all the blocks are the same in the code as they are in the new production. And I changed the block order. I edited this. I'm going to check on these once this migration finishes, just to make sure the migration didn't change any of these things back, because if it did, I need to fix them again. Make sure the comments label is good. I did delete this. So the solar module, if you uninstall and reinstall your site, it kind of loses its connection to what is on your Solar search server. So every time I was doing that, I was reindexing all the new content, but it wouldn't delete all the old content. So I had to go in and in my hosted Apache Solar service, I had to reset my search instance completely. So wipe out the entire search index and reindex. And I haven't reindexed yet on the new site, because I want to do that after this migration is complete. And after we do that, we'll test that search works. I did generate the sitemap on the site, but I don't want to submit it to Google and Bing or anything like that yet, because if I did, the links would all be d8.jeffgeerling.com, and that would probably screw things up with my SEO. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're doing a Drupal migration or any kind of migration. First of all, make sure that it's not accessible to Google. Otherwise, you're going to have duplicate content popping up if anybody links to it anywhere. And also it will, there's just a lot of different things that you can have issues with. Also, when you're running processes like migrations, you want to make sure that Path Auto is disabled. I found out a bug that whenever a new blog post was imported, all of them were getting the date 2020 because I had a Path Auto path alias. So this one is from 2020, but let's see if I can find one from 2017. Let's just go back in time a little bit. Hold on. Page 8. Yeah, so here's the one from 2019. So the path here is /blog/2019. I had a Path Auto rule set up that was using the current date instead of the content date, so the date that the node was posted. So this was being updated every time that I was running the migration to 2020, and the old path was not actually redirected to the new one. So if I would have done that and gone live, I would have lost all those old links, and there would have been a way for me to regenerate them as redirects, but it would have created a major mess. So I wanted to make sure that all the links were preserved and the same as they were in Drupal 7. So I had to make sure to turn off Path Auto And I also updated that path auto rule to make sure that if I edit an old blog post, it doesn't wipe out the old URL and redirect it to 2020, because obviously I didn't write a blog post in 2016 and 2020. I wish I could time warp, but I cannot. So let's let this go for a minute, and I'll check on live chat. William Heriter says, recently broke my site for a little bit. I've been learning Nginx configuration. Yeah, there's a lot of little things in Nginx that can trip you up. And really the only way to figure those out is to do things and break stuff. That happens all the time. I think the one thing that I think trips people up sometimes is if you come from Apache. Apache is extremely lenient. Like, you could be missing a doc root, or the host name could be wrong, or your aliases could be wrong, all that kind of stuff. And Apache's like, it's okay. But Nginx is like, no, this has to be right. And it's a double-edged sword. It's nice to have that amount of detail, and it won't work unless it's all right. However, it also, if you're used to kind of cowboy changes to to your configurations, and you do those a lot, Nginx will blow up in your face a lot more. Whereas Apache is usually like, that's okay. I'll work even if it's not great. And some of those things you can also configure Nginx to not be so complainy about, but that is something that trips people up a lot when they're coming over from Apache in particular. It looks like people from Brazil and Germany. That's cool. And Oliver said Brisbane? No, Wales. Sorry about that. Let's see what else is in here. Yep. Ansible Playbooks, Kenya too. Yeah, and William is talking about big migrations. Yeah, this migration is not huge. There's, what is the one that it's on right now? Files? No, file was 2,700. What is there 6,000 of? Nog? Oh, tags maybe. Yeah, this migration has like 5,000 to 10,000 things tops in any particular category. I've worked on a couple migrations where there were hundreds of thousands of items, and there's a lot of issues that come up when you do that much. You have not only the migration itself, if you can find a way, I know in Drupal 7 there's a way to parallelize Drush so that you could have multiple instances of a migration running at the same time. I haven't found a way to do that in Drupal 8, so what a lot of people do is they set up the migrations to kind of run continuously. So they run every morning or something like that, so that you're just doing updates and new created stuff. And then towards the end, you plan out, like, this week the migration will be running. So that's one way to do it. Another concern there is you want to make sure that all the content is indexed in Solr, or if you have other tools that need to operate on all your content as well, you need to make sure that you have enough time for that to happen, because Solr is a relatively heavyweight operation to parse all the content and index it. And if you have hundreds of thousands of nodes on your site, then Solr is going to take a while too. So you have to account for that as well. And there are some ways that you can kind of pre-fill all that information. Like I'm doing here, I have d8.jeffgreeland.com is running next to my current production site, and then I'm just going to flip the domains. But it still is something that if you have a lot of, that's interesting. I don't think I care about these warnings, but it is annoying to see that. This is another thing where, oh, great. I should probably disable the search index right now. So here's where we start running into fun little problems. Last night I also upgraded the Search API Solr module from 8.x 3.x to 8.x 4.0.0, which is a brand new release that changes a lot of things and probably changed something that is causing an issue here. So I'm going to disable the server for now. Oh, okay, it disabled the index. I thought it said it was going to delete the index. I don't want that to happen. All right, so I'm going to run this migration again. Actually, it already did which ones did it do? It got up to taxonomy term tags. Okay, so it was doing blog posts when it failed. I'm going to do starting at blog post. Delete all that. So we'll run this again, and this time it shouldn't be doing any Solr stuff. What I'm guessing happened was Solr was trying to index as it was doing the migration, and it kind of blew up because Solr probably was like, oh my gosh, stop sending all these nodes so quickly. And that happens. Anyway, so we were talking about migrations in big chunks. Oliver is saying his video on Ansistrano and using Ansible for Drupal deployments was at CMS Philly. And he's doing it again for Drupal Yorkshire. So if you want to post a link to that, I'll or even tweet and mention me, and I'll retweet that too to get some visibility for that, because it is a good presentation talking about real world Drupal deployment with Ansible. Osmo is talking about my RPi cluster. So I have I've been working on episodes 3 and 4. So I have it in the case right now. It's plugged into the network, but this is not PoE, so it's not powered up. But I have everything ready to go. I just was working on some K3s issues with it, and that, like I said, I was thinking about having it set up to run my jeffgeerling.com site today, but there were a lot of little issues with that, and I didn't want to have it blow up spectacularly. This could blow up kind of like a fizzling explosion, but we'll see. So now it's got the blog post done. We'll see how that goes. What else? Why aren't I, it's hard to read this from my perspective. Why am I not using a static site builder like Hugo? I actually use that a lot so like I have ansible.jeffgeerling.com. This is built with GitHub Pages, which uses, Jekyll on GitHub Pages. So I have this using Jekyll. I have sites like Ansible for DevOps.com. This is literally a static HTML site that has HTML and CSS. And I think there's JavaScript for something. I don't remember what it is, but I often do that for small microsites. But for my blog, there's a couple reasons why I stuck with Drupal. One is I do like the layout system in Drupal and the way that you can manage content and fields and blocks and things like that. I also like the easy integration with Solr Search. So it's really easy to have good site search. 99.9% of people don't use a custom site search to find things, but I do all the time because my blog is my notebook and my reference guide for everything I've ever done on the world in the world of computing. So if I want to figure out like Vagrant on Windows, I'll do Vagrant window. It's Windows. But as I said, with Solr, it's really nice. Drupal has a really deep integration with Solr that you just click a few buttons and it works. So I like that about it. I also like the fact that the comment system is nice and integrates with a lot of different, some spam here. Some spam gets through, but it integrates with a lot of spam prevention utilities and things. And I have 4,000 or 5,000 comments on the site. A lot of them have a ton of great information. And that's one reason I stick with a dynamic site like this. And I've used in the past Discus and some other hosted comment systems. And I tried using a couple of the open source ones, but a lot of them are not as simple as Drupal's built-in commenting system. And I like simple and built-in, which is nice. And I'm familiar with it. And in the end, it comes down to the golden hammer, Abraham Maslow, I forget his first name, Maslow's law of the instrument, where you tend to use something even if it might not be the best tool for the job. Let me delete this. Actually, if I delete this, I'm doing the migration right now. That could cause an issue. So I won't delete that comment for now. Let's see, any other interesting things here? Nginx over Apache. I can go either way. There's some times when I still lean on Apache, especially in a container environment using Apache with mod PHP. If you don't need the robust scalability and caching and things like that in Nginx, it can be a little bit simpler and easy to set up. Gordon says, hi, Jeff. I say hi to you. Tim Cook is back, apparently. Mr. Cook, as it were, or Tim Apple. Oliver says, could you use all to run the migrations? I can do them all if I want to, but I don't want to do them all because a few of the migrations are for configuration and things like that. And if I do that, it'll reset some of the settings that I've done, like the comments block, having the comment title above, and the front page block listing and things like that. Let's see. Excited for the Pi Drupal. Yeah, we'll get there. Probably episode 4 or 5 of that Pi series. Yeah, Gordon mentions the same thing I just said. You don't want to convert config things that I've set up. How much does solar cost? So good question. That's a good segue into, and this is not sponsored, but since I own the service, I can talk about it. Hosted Solar, which is one of many different solar hosting solutions, is made just for Drupal. Someday I might get into WordPress or some other systems, but we'll see. It's $10 a month is what I charge, and that pretty much covers the cost of the servers and gives a little bit of profit, so that I want to keep this going. And I've been running Hosted Solar since 2008 and had 99.95% uptime for that entire time. And now we're up to, what is it? Probably a few hundred clients with a few 60, 70 servers, something like that. So that was, Hosted Solar was one of the two things that really got me into Ansible quickly, because I needed to go from 1 server to 2, then 2 servers to 4 and 8 and 12. And I've never advertised the service really. This year was the first time I even mentioned it really. In the Drupal community, Hosted Apache Solar is now a community supporter of the Drupal Association as part of the Drupal Cares campaign. All right, so this worked. It didn't create any new blog posts. I want to make sure. So one of the things I need to do, so let's see, I'm going to enable this search index. Oh, I forgot to turn off notifications. That's always fun. Let me do that. All right, so I turned on Solar. I want to check and make sure that everything is exactly the same on D8 as it is on jeffgeerling.com. So I'm going to pop over here, and let's make sure that the most recent blog post is watch out if composer update keeps replacing a dependency. Make sure all the comments are the same. Now this is one other fun thing about, yeah, so this comment did make it over. That's good. One thing that's a little fun about migrations on a live site is, as I'm talking, you could be posting a comment to jeffgeerling.com, and since I just ran this migration a few minutes ago, that comment would be lost. So unless you take down your current site, which sometimes is a good idea, but I don't typically like doing that unless it's a site that is like a forum or something that gets tons of new content all the time. Unless you take down the site, there's a risk that something that's posted there will go into the other. So if you do have a lot of web forms or things like that, you might want to turn those off temporarily. Or once you start this final migration, you might go to your old site and just go put it in maintenance mode. Some people do that, and sometimes it is necessary, especially if you do have if you have a commerce system, you wouldn't want to have orders coming into your old site after you do the migration and then they're lost. That would be horrible. So if you do commerce, or if you have something like medical systems or forms that you need to track that data, then yeah, you should probably put it in migration mode. So that said, if you want to put a comment, which will not ever be displayed anywhere, but will go into the other, you might as well do that now on jeffgeerling.com. So here's the new site, here's the old site. Let's check a couple other things. If I go to the About page, make sure it's the same. And notice that if you're on an OLED device, this is nice and black, and this is gray. That was one of the accessibility improvements. Not only accessibility, but this helps if you do have an OLED, the true black actually saves a little energy. So I guess this is the greener version of my site at this point. Let's see. Let's get back to my punch list. So I was just doing a spot check to make sure that the migration worked. I want to make sure if I go to d8.jeffgeerling.com, this should be, the block placement is right. I'm going to make sure that this image has the right path. Site's default files, because I moved in Drupal 7, I used a subfolder since I had multi-site in Drupal. I had a subfolder sites/jeffgeerling.com, and I wanted to make sure that all the files were updated to have the new path, sites default files. And there's a redirect, so if I copy this link and I paste it in here, if I go to sites/jeffgeerling.com, it will redirect me to sites/default files. And since I'm using Nginx proxying, it actually redirects me to port 81 inside of Nginx. But outside of that, it should work correctly. So, excuse me. Osmo's asking some more questions about the Pi cluster. We'll get to a lot of those things in the Pi cluster series. Don't worry about that. In episode 5, I believe, I'll be talking a little bit more about the Turing Pi and its power consumption. And William says he often freezes comments and nodes. That's definitely an option. You can just go to permissions in Drupal and turn off the ability to post things, and that'll work. I also just realized I have mail running. Let's quit that too. Okay, so that's good. Remove the broken block. Make sure the main page content's good. I did those. Make sure that about is up here, and that is there. Delete the Solar search instance. Let's do that now. Let's make sure that the search is empty. There should be 0 items. Yeah, so there's 0 items right now. And if I go to the index, it should have 0. That's funny. 100% of 0 items. Let me rebuild the tracking information, because I think since this module was disabled while the nodes were being imported, it didn't track any of the nodes, and that was causing all these issues. Okay, so now it knows that there's 2,918 items. I want to compare that also with my current site to see if we're in the same ballpark. Search API, index 2894. That's interesting. There's some more items on here. I wonder if it's project. I wonder if I didn't index project nodes on my old site or something. But since there's more, 2918. Oh, so that's right. That is weird. My old site only has 2894 out of 2918. So some nodes on my old site were never indexed, apparently. So this new site will actually have a more complete index. That's one thing that can happen from time to time with Solar. If something fails indexing but gets tracked, it could make it through. Also, I wanted to mention right over here, there's my little DrupalCon in honor of the new site migration today. So let's index everything on the site. 25 items at a time. It looks like it's doing 50 at a time. So maybe I should have changed that to 25, saved it, and then done the indexing. Oh, there it goes, 25 at a time. All right, so it's doing that. Let's check what else is on our list here. Regenerate the XML sitemap. I'll let this go first just because I don't want this to fail while it's regenerating the sitemap. All right. It's taking a little time. This is the most exciting way to spend your morning. Thanks for spending it with me, watching Solar index my website. Very fun. You might also hear some pounding. That's my kids literally running around upstairs. When they don't have something particular to do, they seem to enjoy running around and acting like they're spaceships or something. And the oldest, my 7-year-old son, runs around and acts like he's exploding things all the time. So sometimes it gets quite loud here, especially when all 3 of them do it. And our youngest, I don't know how this is possible. She jumps onto her knees on the rug on the hardwood floor, and she doesn't care. Like, if I did that, I would probably not be walking for a week or 2. She can do it 20 times in a row, and it's super loud, and it makes everything in here shake a little bit. I don't know how kids do it, but you might hear that throughout this stream. Almost finished. You can also hear my laptop's fans going crazy. It's funny, like the CPU, it's 22% average right now, but the fans don't really kick in until it's up to like 90 or 95%. Then it gets to be like a hairdryer down there. Just an interesting thing about the fans on this laptop, but it's nice because it keeps it usually below 70 degrees Celsius. This is the CPU's temperature here. On the old laptop, it would get up to 80, 82 sometimes, and it would get super duper hot. All right, so everything's indexed. Let's see. This should go up to 2918 after 2 minutes. But just to test everything, let's go here and search for Ansible. And found 14 results so far. Jeff Geerling, if I search for Ansible, there's going to be a lot more. So it's probably still working on the actual indexing. So let me go back here and check on that. So Solar has a 2-minute delay between when content is imported. That's how I have it set up, just for performance. There's a 2-minute delay before the content that's sent to the Solar server is added to the index to make sure that batches don't bring down the server. So now it's up to 2838. Refresh this. Now there's 188 results. So yeah, it's filling in. And as I mentioned in a previous episode, we fixed this issue here. This is invisible practically. And now I just realized there's a new issue. There's no space between the checkbox and the numbers, so I'll have to fix that later. Might as well make an issue for it. Let's see. jeffgeerling.com, new issue. Fix spacing between check mark boxes and text on search filter blocks. See illustration. And I'll grab that screenshot that I just did. All right, bug, and it's in the theme. All right, so we'll fix that later sometime. Not a big deal for now, though. Like I said, I'm probably one of 3 people that have ever used the search functionality on my site. Let's refresh this one more time. I just want to see if it gets up higher. Yeah, 188 is good enough for me. There's 191 here. So maybe there's one thing missing, but it has all the same stuff that's at the top of this. And if I search for Vagrant Windows, it should show me that same result, Vagrant Windows. Developing with VirtualBox and Vagrant on Windows. Yep. So search looks like it's working correctly. That's good. Let's see what else we got. Regenerate the XML sitemap. I'm actually going to do that. Let's see if I have one. Sitemap.xml. So this has the d8.jeffgeerling.com. So I'm not going to regenerate it right now, because if I do, it's going to keep that URL. What I'm going to do is make sure that in the cutover, I need to, sometimes scrolling is not fun. Okay, so I'm going to move this step to here to regenerate the sitemap after it uses the new domain. Let's see, and then, so we did that. I moved that. I'll do this in there to verify cron is running. I believe I have that in the post migration steps cron. Yeah, so that's in here. So I'm going to close this out. I'm not going to do these, but I'll check them. That's definitely the wrong thing to do. Oh, apparently I found this issue last week too. Closing this and moving final work to punch list. Close and comment. All right. We did that. Okay, so now I'm going to go into my playbook that does this deployment, and I'm going to edit the vhosts, and this is where the rubber meets the road. We're going to see if I can blow everything up or not. I need to add this to here, and I'm going to put the doc root here. And this will be jeffgeerling.com. That's the new doc root. I believe that this security certificate should work correctly. Again, I haven't tested this part, so could blow up spectacularly. We'll see. Delete that, the d8.jeffgeerling.com completely. And this should, actually what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put d7.jeffgeerling.com so I could visit that if I want to, Drupal 7. The funny thing is that that's not actually going to work until I set up a sites alias for Drupal, but I'll leave that running just so that just so that if I need to access that in emergency mode, I can get back to the D7 site here. Once I set up the sites.php file to do that in Drupal 7. All right, so that change is correct. I updated the Docker root. I removed that entry. I actually changed it to D7. All right, edit the deploy.yml. So I'm going to take out this Drupal 7 cron job. Actually, I want to make this absent state. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out, and then I'll figure out what to do with it later. It's going to try running that cron job as well in Drupal 7, and I might just leave it for now. We'll see. Then I'm going to add this Drupal 8 cron job, which is going to use drush to run cron, hopefully, if it works. I haven't tested cron at all, actually, so it might blow up too. So I did that. Okay, so this is where we could see what happens if things blow up or not. Let's run it. And let's see what happens. As they say, drum roll. If someone else wants to do a drum roll, unfortunately we can't hear it. And if I do the drum roll, you'll just hear the microphone kind of thudding a little bit, so I'm not going to do that. Okay. I'm surprised that didn't result in change. Oh, here, copy vhost into place. Now this is something that since I didn't test it, this could be a little funny. Let me go into the vhost directory. Oh, it restarted. Don't ever do this, but I'm going to do it really quick. cd nginx sites enabled. All right, so www.jeffgeerling.com is the config. I'm going to, it actually didn't remove that config because of the way I have it set up. I should have had it remove that, but that's, well, I'm going to remove it. rm-f d8 system control restart nginx. Hopefully that doesn't blow up. We'll see. All right, it didn't. Exit. All right, let's see if that worked. Hey, this is looking good so far. And user, ooh, Touch ID. I have my laptop open. I can actually try it out. So I'm logged in, and so far things are looking good. If anybody out there wants to try visiting the site and see if it's working for you, it might actually be cached. Let me go. No, Nginx must have cleared the cache because it saw that it's a new site. Oh, that's not right. Okay, there we go. So Nginx is probably caching a few things, or my browser might be caching a few things. But so far it's looking pretty good. If I go to the blog and go to comments, that's working. Okay. Now I'm going to go to status report. I have a new fav icon too. So this error I know about. This is a Solarium library thing. So cron has not run recently. I want to see, it should run in the next minute or two. Experimental theme, that's fine. I'm using it for admin. That's okay. That's something that hosted Apache Solar actually does. I wish that we could turn off that warning. Maybe there's a way to do that. Oliver says it's loading for him, so that's good. Memory limit, I need to drop that down, but I'll do that after the live stream's over. Everything else is looking pretty good at this point. Let me check on my list here. Oh, the sitemap. I want to do that quickly because right now, if you go to XML Sitemap, not XML Sitemap, sitemap.xml, then it still says D8, so I'm going to go to simple XML sitemap, rebuild queue and generate, and that should update these sitemap files to make sure they have the right stuff. I hope it does that before cron runs, because when cron runs, it's going to submit them to Google and Bing, and then it's going to have the wrong URLs. Google and Bing pick up d8.jeffgeerling. All right, so that just did it. Let's see if this is right. Yeah, so this is right. If I click on one of these, then everything is coming up correctly. Let's make sure that some of these old links work. Hello world, that's good. Okay. All right, so it looks like everything is working. I think I'm good. Did that, did that. Look at number 64, post-migration task follow-ups. Let's see, jeffgeerling.com, recent log messages. What time is it? So this is interesting. There's issues here. We'll have to figure that out sometime. Maybe that's a bug I can open up and figure out what's going on. Page not found. That's funny. Replacing foam. So I'll probably have to monitor the 404s and try to figure out why some of these things are being funny. I don't know why this looks a little interesting that it's hitting these. Yeah, I don't know why those links would be. Those might have been 404s from the old site too that are just coming over here. I don't know why there's a taxonomy term that's not found. It's all these feeds. This is probably from bots. That's my guess. Okay, so check the watchdog log. We did that. I'm going to keep monitoring that though. We don't need to do the DNS propagation. I'll check the email after the stream. There was an issue with some email addresses like jeffgeerling.com would not work correctly. But I tested it last night and it was working for my other domains. This is something I'll check a little later. If you guys want to leave comments on the site, then I can also see if my comment to email system is working. And then verify path auto is working, so I'll do that really quick. Content, blog post, test post, path auto, testing. And I'm gonna, where's published? I don't want it published right now, save. All right, so blog 2020, that works. I'll delete this page. And I don't have to verify the other ones right now. Page load performance, so let's do that really quick. I just wanted to make sure that Drupal 8 didn't all of a sudden explode my performance. So I was getting a 99% performance score. Let's run this again and see if I still get that. I don't know how long it'll take. I found the site Fast or Slow a couple weeks ago on Hacker News, and it gives a really good report of how quick your site's loading and global response times and things like that. So that was kind of cool. 99, so that's good. And it looks the same. So that was kind of one of my goals. I think at this point, if I also want to check analytics.midwesternmac.com, it says there's 16 visitors, so that means it's been sending some traffic, so that's good. Looks like the Fathom analytics are working. I'll be monitoring this as well. Another thing that you want to do after a migration is check and make sure that you don't all of a sudden see a huge traffic drop off or see a ton of new 404s, because that means you missed something, which might have happened, but we'll see. This is just the last few minutes, so it's not reflective of anything. If it keeps going like this for a long time, then I know I have a problem on my hands. But it looks like everything's working, and so I think instead of having the fire graphic, I'm going to do the confetti here, and I guess congratulate myself. Yay! So fun. Thanks for watching this live stream series. This was the first time I ever did a live stream on YouTube. I've done some live streaming work in the past, but I was usually the producer in a back room somewhere and other people were on the camera. So being the producer and the talent is definitely a lot different. And the cool thing about this is I started doing the Drupal live stream in February, I think, I think it was February. And it was kind of on a whim. I was like, you know what? I'm never going to do this migration unless I have a reason to do it. So I did the live stream to force me to do it. and it's worked. But the cool thing that enabled was once we started having the issues, the global, I'm not going to name anything because I know that that's going to demonetize this video. Once that started happening, I was like, hey, I could do the same thing, but for Ansible. And that has helped a lot of people with the Ansible 101 series. And so it's been really cool, and it's been an interesting ride for these 16 episodes. So thank you especially to people who've come to all the streams. I know I've seen Oliver and Mr. Cook on a number of them. And Ralph says he gets the daylight version. That's because you're not using dark mode. You gotta make sure you use dark mode. Much more fun. Anyways, yeah, and William says there's still more work to do, but congrats. Thanks very much. And thanks for watching. I hope that these videos over time, if you're watching it in the future, has helped you with something in your own migration or your own Drupal site setup. It's always, I find it fascinating to watch other people do their work and compare how I do things and see where I'm better than them and see where I'm way worse than them, all those kind of things. And I've mentioned many times throughout the series, sometimes it's do as I say, not as I do, like with the way that the server is set up right now. It's not super robust, but it's working, and the performance is good. So thanks for watching. And if you do want to see some more content like this, definitely consider subscribing to this YouTube channel. Also consider supporting me on Patreon and GitHub. I've seen a lot of new people supporting me after those Raspberry Pi videos, which is awesome. And the more I get out of those revenue streams, the more I'm able to do work like this on the YouTube channel, and also do some work on my open source projects and touch up code and do contributions. Like for instance, the Pi series, I've now submitted about 15 PRs to the K3S Ansible repository to make its playbook a little more robust and work better. I'd like to do more of that kind of stuff. And the more I can support myself through open source, the more I can do that. So thank you very much to people who support me there. And I will be back tomorrow with the Ansible live stream talking about the first 5 minutes of server security using Ansible. So thank you very much, and I'll see some of you tomorrow, and the rest of you have a great week.